little longer. And we're live. I still got to get the timing down on the new.
I'm be honest with you. I didn't even have you on screen when you did the 3, 2, 1 thing, so I didn't even see it because
uh
I'm still getting myself organized. Hell, like we're live, right?
yeah, we're live.
Hell, we're easily within our 70th, maybe 80th episode, and we still suck at openings.
Yeah, I need to actually do a proper count. I think we might be coming up on episode 100 soon.
Ooh, oh shit. Well, hello everybody. Welcome to maybe the 100th episode.
It's not. We're like
Okay,
we're like probably about mid 80s to 90s.
welcome to probably the mid 80s episode of Morning Ritual. I forgot the name of the show. I'm one of your hosts, Noir. I go by he, they pronouns. You can find me all over the internet as TheNoirEnigma. That's Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, man. OnlyFans if you're nasty. And this is your other host.
Hi, I'm Anita. You can find me everywhere at PAHNITA, Anita, or at uh, Critical Misses. Uh, you can find me, on Twitter until that crumbles into the ground. I'm riding that boat until it sinks like the Titanic, the Titanic. Yeah. And we've got an amazing guest today. Uh,
Hell yeah.
Quincy, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, my name is Quincy. I go by he, him, his pronouns. You can find me all over the internet at Quintessence, including the Tower of Cards that can fall in a strong wind. That is Twitter. That's how I've been describing it. It's like, oh, it might just someone could just blow really hard at this point, and it'll all go crashing down. I do a bunch of things. I know these two here from playing a Star Wars RPG. The show of which, the play of which, there's all these rules about how you're supposed to call these things to not get sued. The the in reality playing of this
The
called
actual
Ember
play?
Squad over with Stream Punks. But I do a bunch of things. I'm actually a an audio journalist as my job. Um, and so I do a podcast called Asian Americana, which is a show about Asian American culture and history, long form public radio e style. And I do a bunch of shows for other people, but behind the scenes y. And I'm also a voice actor. So there's those.
Hell yeah, man. I first things first, I have to ask, how'd you get into voice acting and how do you like it?
Uh, Voice acting game is really funny because I love it. I absolutely love it. When I was like starting out in like acting in high school was just like you're doing shows, and then as I started being like this might be a real career, I always thought like it'd be great to do all these like the traditional acting-y fancy things where you're like a famous person and winning tons of awards, and that might still be in the books for anyone watching. But I also realistically thought like, it'd be really cool if I could just even just like voice act, like, and get regular gigs that way. And at the time, even that seemed really, really hard. Because we also find out that that's a niche that is one, just as demanding, like skill wise and training wise. But two, like it's also much more niche. Like people don't necessarily know how to just get started in it. And I just lucked out because I just got a few opportunities based on like, I'm Thai Chinese American,
Hmm.
and sometimes there are roles where they're like, we need someone who's a trained actor but also can speak Thai, and it's to record backgrounds for these action movies where something's happening in the foreground where they're like running away from gangsters, and the background is like it's at a Thai market in Thailand, and you're like, I need voice actors to do the market part, which will mix way down so no one hears anything you say, but it has to be accurate because it's the year of
Because
our Lord, whatever it is, and people can't be like really racist like gibberish back there anymore. So really accurate Thai market stuff that's going to be heavily directed and mixed way back so no one has any idea what's happening back there. And then that eventually snowballed into enough stuff that I'm doing like audiobooks and guest spots on cartoons, and I hope to keep riding that train. So
You're also the voice of Chip and Dale in the Thai dub, correct?
uh so surprisingly not a dub. So Disney's Mickey Mouse, which I think they make because they just want people to remember that they own Mickey Mouse, even though the copyright is always like gonna potentially expire soon, and they're like extending it. And if they can't extend it, they at least want to be like, you can make a Mickey Mouse, but you can't make Disney's Mickey Mouse. But their cartoon, Disney's Mickey Mouse, and I think it's now called Mickey Mouse and Friends or something like that, is just a series of shorts that are done really funny. They're really like postmodern. They're really absurd. One of the episodes, my favorite episodes of that I'm not in, is one where they finally address the whole Goofy and Pluto are both dogs. Um, and it's Goofy hanging out with Mickey, and Mickey's like here you go, Pluto, and like like petting him and treating him, and Goofy's like, oh, the easy life, I gotta work and stuff. So like Goofy starts acting more like an actual dog, and Mickey's like, except also still like anthropomorphized. So it's like, say I love you, Pluto, and he's like, I love you, and then Goofy goes, I love you, Mick. It's so good. I am not in that episode. I'm in an episode that like some of these episodes take place in other countries, and they do their best to like actually like have people who speak that language and stuff coach their real like Mickey and Minnie or whomever actors, and B get to voice some other characters. And I got to voice some of the background non-name characters, but as well as sing and co-compose a 10-second song for Chip and Dale. And it's like a 10-second joke. The idea is that Mickey and Minnie, spoiler alert for this 3-year-old cartoon short, Mickey and Minnie are like fighting over a boat spot in a floating market in Thailand. And then because they're too busy fighting each other, Chip and Dale just sail on in while singing a song. And then I get to sing that song as them. So that was pretty fun. That went viral in Thailand, which I did not expect.
That's incredibly dope. Like, I have to ask, is there like a dream VO project that you would like to be involved in? Like, if you could just put that, hired stamp on any application you put in for a VO gig, what do you think it'd be?
Oh man. I all love to the recently late Kevin Conroy, because that's one of my big inspirations.
Oh god, that broke my fucking heart.
And he's so good, and especially when you find out that like the way he first got the part was because he was playing it more natural and more to his like actual tone.
Yeah.
And also like the later comic that he wrote and released a few years ago that talked about like what it was like being a queer man in this industry, and like getting to be this Batman voice. He's the voice of Batman for Batman the Animated Series, and then a bunch of other stuff after, and a bunch of batsmen after. And like I would love to be, not specifically Batman, but like just I would love to be in like a superhero show. Especially one to that quality would be great. I mean, they don't make them like that all the time because that takes a lot of work and effort to make something as like crisp and stylized as Batman the Animated Series. But I'll do like the sillier, funny ones too. I also love like Brave and the Bold and Justice League Action as much as I loved Batman the Animated Series and Justice League Unlimited and stuff. So like, I'm not a big pick, like I'm not too picky. I'm not be like, I'm gonna pass on the superhero part because it's not to the tone. And like, no, I will totally do it. But I would love to do something like that, or
that would be so cool.
Or to just do like, I've gotten to guest spot on a couple of like these Disney cartoons that are just written from a more like, I got to guest spot on Disney's Amphibia, and that was really cool. I got to guest spot on a different show that I guess I can't say yet because until it comes out, you're not really supposed to talk about it. But another one that's in this style, where it's like just original characters, and like it's really driven by the creator's personal cultural background or the actor's cultural background, and like that sounds super fun too, because then you get to just be like create new original characters. As cool as it would be to be like, I voice Blue Beetle in this blah blah blah. It's also cool to be like, I voice this original character that is like, I'm going to be identified with that character forever because like I did that show or whatever, and people who watch it really are into it. So either one of those two would be great.
Like Tara Strong as Harley Quinn.
Yeah, I think you would kill it as any of the Flashes. By the way, like when you were saying like you love a superhero, I immediately felt Flash. Like I don't know why.
I do love the Flash. I mean I grew up on the DC superheroes just because I'm not a big like polarized guy. I'm not like I like one thing so I have to hate the other one.
Yeah.
Like We played Star Wars as a game, but I super love Star Trek. Here's my. I would also love to be on a Star Trek. I forgot about that. Put me on lower decks. Put me on lower
Do
decks.
it!
Do it!
I'm wearing their official Cerritos Ritos like recreation shirt, which is just their take on like Star Trek Discovery has like disco shirts for when they're just like jogging on the ship,
Yeah.
and so they release these like Ritos shirts for Star Trek Lower Decks. I'd love to be on that. DC and Marvel are both cool, but I just grew up watching the Bruce Timm series, like Batman animated series, Superman animated series, stuff like that. I'm actually a big Green Lantern fan, and there's there's like 7,200 of those I could voice. So, you know.
Oh, see, now I'm trying to remember all the Green Lanterns because that's the nerd in me. Hal Jordan.
All the human ones alone.
John Stewart. What's the redheaded one's name?
Guy Gardner.
Guy Gardner. Oh yeah, he got knocked up by Batman. And then there's Kyle something.
Kyle
right?
Rayner.
Kyle Rayner.
There it is. I thank you for Kyle Rayner was always my favorite too. He became the Iron. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. So you also do like acting as well, like in person, in camera, in studio acting as well, right?
Yeah, on camera acting. So just to clarify for folks, right? Like voice acting is totally acting. I'm not like
absolutely.
Oh right, I'm so sorry.
I'm not knocking like you know we're it's voice acting is totally acting. It is different from on-screen acting. I've also done on-screen acting. Those are more like independent stuff or like comedy sketches. I got to do a comedy sketch with Conan once. This is like 5 years ago or something, and I still milk it every year because it's for Thai New Year. I get a lot of work based on the culture, and I'm not hating it. I'm not limited to that, but I think there's no shame in doing it as long as like you get to dictate like how it's presented and like it's done thoughtfully and cleverly and respectfully, or if the joke isn't like your holiday is dumb, the joke is like, you know, hey, the host is being silly, and I got to do that with Conan, so that was really, really super cool. I milk it every year. I repost it every single April. And yeah, otherwise, it's just, you know, I take what I can get. I do a little bit of a indie film and you know, whatever comes my way. It's the reality of a working actor is that like there's a working actors that you're a fan of, and those people have done so much work to even get to that point. And there's working actors like me who you're like, oh, you act. What are the things you've been in? You know, it's like a resume that's like dozens and dozens and dozens of lists long of things you've never heard of and you'll never see.
I respect that grind. It's very much like I've only visited LA twice, and it's always a bizarre experience to just like trip and see like a famous location. I recognize the comedy grind where it's just like people have been grinding in comedy for like 10 to 15 years, and then they get like one spot on like somebody records it and puts it online and it does well, and it's just like, hey, check out this new comedian. It's just like so like no, I get that. That's it's you got to put the work in, and like I love meeting people that are doing that. That's amazing.
I totally get it because I also do improv comedy here, and that's another one too where you're like, when you're like, oh, you do comedy, like tell us some jokes right now. I'm like, well, improv requires me to like have a team of people, and like we really have to earn the jokes over like a 25-minute set.
I'm sorry, I do Harold style improv comedy, so it involves a whole setup.
Hard to do an Herald opening by yourself. I could.
I mean, I don't even have anybody to zip zap zop with right now, so I'm not in
this. Zip, zap,
zap,
zop, zip. Like, are you warming up as your comedy bit? Because that's not going to work really well outside of a very small niche of people.
Well, you know, like it's so funny because there's no way to look cool like prepping.
No, and in fact, I think looking uncool is kind of the point because a a lot of what makes improv good is you got to get out of your head. You got to stop. Like, you can't just sit back and be like, what is the funniest thing I can do to impress people? You're like, no, like whatever is out there is out there. And your job is to listen and support your team members. And through that, somehow funny stuff comes out, but not if you're like, let me show all these losers what's a real joke.
Let
Like
me
if you do
shoot
that,
for the
it'll all
funny.
flop.
So, did you study improv anywhere, or like, where do you practice that out of?
I don't know if this is in crop. It's probably not in crop, but I have I'll try to point to it. So there's some degrees here, and the degree I
Okay.
show on camera is actually my fake UCB degree. It's a real UCB certificate. Um, but
Ah,
it's so I've trained at Upright Citizens Brigade, the
yeah.
Los Angeles
I
theater.
love I love UCB. They're so freaking funny.
It was great training. I actually did not start there. I originally started at a historic Asian American comedy troupe in Los Angeles called Cold Tofu, and they still teach. And that was a great place to learn my fundamentals. And an improv town like Chicago, like, will have a lot of groups like this. A lot of towns in general have groups like this. Actually, there's a very known Asian American troupe out of Chicago called Stir Friday Nights. I don't think they're active
Yeah.
anymore, but like they were like a lot of people came out of that.
So one of the members actually moved to LA, and they started an actual play, and that's my friend Shu.
Oh, cool.
Um, yeah, I was in Kids on Bikes with Shu as they were making that transition from Chicago to LA, and they're doing very well. One of the funniest people I know,
She was
and
hilarious.
I'm extraordinarily jealous of their talent and the fact that they're in LA now.
Yeah, I mean, it's much like other forms of performing or whatever. Like, a lot of the comedy grinds, just like you do your thing and you just make friends and develop your skills with these communities. And like, I think that's so valuable. That's like, I've developed so much of my skill in those spaces. But yeah, I train with Cold Tofu, Upright Citizens Brigade, which is like one of the only big theaters that's like didn't close an LA shop. Not counting Groundlings, who was already here, but like, I trained at IO
Yeah. Oh
before they
God.
shut the LA theater down. And then I can get into so much improv tea about
Yeah, there's so
theaters.
much drama. Like, honestly, right now, the only thing I know is that there's a lot of drama in the LA improv scene involving Second City in
Because
LA.
they ghosted LA. They were like,
Yeah,
Second City's back in
they took
Chicago and
y'all off
Toronto.
the
End of sentence.
website. Oh my God. I'm sorry, we're having improv tea right now.
Listen, I'm here for
Um,
it.
the the longest short from what I understand, and Quincy, please feel free to fill in anything that I miss. LA was supposed to have a Second City location, and then like I guess they just never got around to making the
Oh,
location.
no, 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 no. It is much, much worse.
Oh shit.
Second City Hollywood has existed for a very long time. Um, and it was that super inaccessible theater. If anyone's ever, it's right on the Hollywood Strip. Which, by the way, don't open theaters on Hollywood. That's not a fun neighborhood. It's like LA's Times Square, but before Times Square got really Disneyfied. So it's like annoying to drive to, annoying to park at. It primarily appeals to tourists, and not even very well, because tourists always come and they're like really disappointed. I'm like, yeah, because we don't go there either. I only went there to like go to these comedy shows. And I was like, why do they put this here? I hate parking here. I hate driving here. Surprisingly, there is public transit in that area, but then you have to live somewhere that can get you onto the network before it takes you to there. Second City Hollywood, which is this second story theater, so you have to walk up a narrow band of stairs to get up there. So good luck if you have a wheelchair. Is That is a knock on the theater, not a knock on people with wheelchairs. Sam Delev would kill me. And
Absolutely.
is and they were around, and I had friends that taught there, and I had friends that did like musical theater improv there, or musical improv there, and like that trained there and stuff like that. And so it wasn't that they never got around to doing it; it's that they had one fully, and then during pandemic times they had to like shut it down, which, it sucks, but that's what a lot of theaters had to do, because it's not safe to like gather a bunch of people in a crowded room to laugh at people making up stuff. And laughter has a lot of particles, y'all.
Yeah.
And And then when Second City was like, hey, guess what? We're back open in Chicago and Toronto.
Yep.
And all the LA people were like, did you forget something? Why does your site have two buttons that just say Chicago and Toronto on it? And are we on payroll still? What's happening? So that's kind of that situation versus IO, which also closed its LA theater in a very like a lot of people didn't want that kind of way and felt that it was like, oh no, we're losing all these opportunities and like we felt like we never got the support and resources from there. But at least they told them, like we knew that
Yeah.
was gonna happen. And Second City, they were just like, so are we? Am I? Is this?
Oh no, 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 no.
And they were still doing like online digital classes, from what I understand. So they were doing the work. They just weren't hearing anything from Second City,
Yeah.
which is kind of shady. Like,
In a way, comedy theaters and maybe like varying, not all, but many and varying, like TTRPG production shops kind of share sort of like a hey, we're just doing the best that we can, and like we don't really know what we're doing, and like that's great if it's you and your friends having fun anyway.
Yeah.
But the moment
yeah.
you like people rely on you and you have to protect people's like, either personal needs or like professional needs or like pay or like accessibility or whatever, like you gotta step up that professionalism game, y'all. Like you can't be like we don't know what we're doing as we manage this like huge theater and lots of money and people's paychecks or
Yeah,
people's lack of paychecks.
that whole gee golly, folks, we're all in this together thing is kind of wearing thin, especially if you're as big as like, Second City or some of these actual play channels have grown to.
And I think they both of these spaces kind of use that like, well, like you shouldn't really be doing this for money anyway. Like, aren't we all doing this just to have fun? It's like I can have fun with my friends off camera. Like that's if I'm getting paid a sandwich and a pack of Doritos to go to my friend's house to run D&D. Great, that's great. I love my friends. Doritos are pretty dope. I love a good sandwich. That's great. And if that's my pay to be like, hey, produce work, write work, be on camera, go teach something, I'm gonna be like, no, man, you can't pay me in sandwich and chips.
Like as soon as somebody else makes $1 off of someone else's funny, I think it stops. It should cease to be like, gee golly, we're just doing it for the love of the game. No, man, I'm trying to get that cheddar. Put the money in my hand.
I think this is almost us getting into petty primetime a little bit early.
I mean, that's another segment. You know what? We can do an early petty prime time. So, Quincy, just to explain what petty prime time is, sometimes we carry a lot of hate in our heart, and with Twitter perhaps sinking, there's no better time than now to subtweet somebody live. So like if there's something that you want to say to somebody, you can subtweet them here. Just say it, like just get it off your chest. Like here, I will give you an example. Oof boy, how do I do this?
I got one if you want.
Oh yes, please go ahead. Give us your petty prime time.
A lot of people that are in the TTRPG AP space want to run this like a business, but have no idea how to run things like a business.
See, see, Anita was talking about somebody specifically, but didn't say who, and that's how we do petty prime time. I've got one just in general. If I hear about someone if I hear about somebody SAing somebody at another convention, I'm gonna lose my fucking mind. If you can't handle your drinks, don't drink. If you know that you're not safe to be around when you're tossed up and drunk, don't drink near people. Like there's gotta be some level of accountability where you know yourself and you work to protect yourself from people. Because if you violate people while you're drunk, that means deep down in your heart you're a predator. Stop it.
Oof. I mean, I feel like part of me is like, if you say it only happens when you drink, that's just your excuse. Like, man,
Exactly.
you're a bad person. Um,
If you know you're a werewolf, don't be hanging out at people with people at a full moon. That's all you, buddy.
what would be mine? Okay. This is a broad ranging. This is outside of any one genre or subculture, but it is a fine line between like, oh, I'm just offering services and my brand and my whatever to my community for, and I deserve to get paid for this, which I think is fair if people already want the thing you're offering, and you're being fair and clear about what you're offering. Between that and just straight up grift, and sometimes I feel like people will grift their own community the hardest because those are the people who are most willing to take a bet on them. And partially because people outside that community are gonna be like, "Who are you? Why would I pay you thousands of dollars to teach me a workshop for something that I don't know?" So, on one hand, I feel like get paid for the work you do, absolutely. And if you are your own business and you have to and you offer a specific service or product or whatever, totally. But some people convince themselves that they're that, and really they're just like taking lots of money and from the people that they're in community with, and I don't always feel great about it.
You touched on another one. Oh man, yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like, if you're doing work to represent your community, that doesn't mean that you get to take it easy because it's your community. That means that you should be working harder because you're representing your own community. Like, if you fuck up, that I feel like minorities and marginalized people understand that it is a privilege to be seen as an individual, in the sense that if a white guy fucks up, it's just that white guy that fucked up. However, if and I can only speak to my own experience, if a black guy fucks up, then black people fucked up. And I just feel like you've got to understand that going into mainstream entertainment in general. And if you're going to pick up the flagpole of I'm representing the culture, then you gotta put your whole ussy into it.
Individualism is definitely a white privilege.
It's something that comes up, I think, a lot in. I've been to so many panel discussions, at least from Asian American media and culture makers and stuff. And for a long time, and maybe people still do, whenever people are like, what do you feel like it means for you to for people to see you and place upon you a whole community, and do you feel like you have any responsibility and blah blah blah. And a lot of people who don't want to think about this question are just like, I just want to be seen as me, and I'm just my own thing, and no matter if I make mistakes or whatever, I should just that's just me, and I'm like, I appreciate that intention, but the reality is if you do bad things, people on the outside will see that. But that grinds my gears less than if you do bad things to your own community, because I'm like, y'all, why? And so to add to my first thing is if you think hey, I'm just doing my thing and I deserve to be making money or drawing whatever for the work. Hey, make money for your work, but always think, who is that money coming from, right? Which way is that income flowing? Because if it's flowing from the people who either share your circumstances or have it worse than you or whatever, up to you. That's really different than if you can get or make no qualms about it, I will gladly trick a big company to pay me more.
Yeah.
If you're, I'm on those Disney things. I'm very thankful for the work, Disney. Please keep hiring me. But I always make a joke that I want to have Disney pay me more than I pay Disney. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I would rather make my money from that and then do other community work than to take community money and then buy Disney things. That seems like a weird.
Yeah.
I mean,
well, they're just a really tiny company and they need some help sometimes.
I can't tell you. Oh, go ahead.
they spent all this money buying all these other companies. So how much money do they have left?
They probably don't
know.
have that much going. Like literally, if you can just spend just a couple bucks at the Disney store, I'm sure it'll really help them out.
They just trying to get by.
It's just like their logo is just Mickey with like the folded out pockets and they're empty and it's just like
the empty wallet.
Yeah,
I'm just a poor conglomerate trying to get by. Like I feel that with every fiber of my being. I can't tell you how much merch I have bought from black APs and products and books and stuff that I can't wear anymore because the person ended up being like a piece of garbage. Like it's just like, come on. I believed, like, I think when you're selling to your own culture, there's more to that dollar than if I bought something from Disney. If I bought something from Disney, I bought it because it's probably Marvel and I'm a comic book nerd and they just work that dollar out. That dollar doesn't come with my belief. That dollar doesn't come with my faith. That dollar doesn't come with me cheering them on and telling everybody about this project and trying to make sure it spreads. Those dollars are reserved for my culture. Like if I see, somebody young, black, beautiful trying to do something, I'm like, hey, let's freaking go. And like the amount of times that has bit me in the cheeks is just upsetting.
Yep.
So now that I've successfully brought the mood
Good.
we do have a couple of other questions that we always ask our guests. So I'm gonna move on to one of the next ones, and this is the one that usually makes the guests yell at me. If you could play any TTRPG with any 5 people that are alive right now, you get to choose who's the GM, and you don't count for one of the seats. So you're not one of the 5. What game are you playing? Who's the GM, and who you picking?
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
It's a hard question.
Oh man. Okay. So this is maybe a bad habit, but I've been sitting on a couple game ideas that I've been wanting to do. And I will not reveal them all. Don't steal them, internet. But one of them that I want to do is and the problem with saying this is that like, oh, that means like I'm gonna have to run them, and like this is just when people who run games, people who are like the storyteller / GM / DM / whatever, right? Like, this life. But I can't not think this way. I would love to run there's a White Wolf game called Mage the Ascension.
Yes.
I grew up on White Wolf games. Vampire the Masquerade was my first game, and when I was like 13, and then that was just like all my high school years were just like steeped in that space. And Mage the Ascension is a cool game where it's like it's really fascinating, but it's like hard to play if you're not used to that style of game. But I grew up learning that style of game, so it's not as hard for me. But basically it's just like the idea that magic, their system for magic is just like super loose. You just have like a few categories they're called spheres, and you have like a few dots in them, and then you can basically do anything within those as long as your character believes it's possible. So the whole character creation thing is just like, oh, it's just all these different magical traditions that are, it's set in like the modern real world, and the idea is that there's all these magical traditions and cultural practices that were magical, but the rest of reality has decided is not real, is like fiction, is like myth, but you have such a like powerful like soul, avatar, energy, whatever it is, that you just force it into reality. I want to run that setting, but the game premise is it's reverse Indiana Jones. It's
yes.
Basically the tagline is it doesn't belong in a museum. And it would just be a bunch of heists to repatriate all these like artifacts that shouldn't belong in like the places like the British Museum and whatever, right? Like because these were taken from the rest of the world through looting and colonization and imperialism. Or my favorite story, there's a great podcast called Stuff the British Stole. And one of them was that they took the Greek statues from the the Greek buildings and stuff.
Yeah.
The ones we think of as like, oh, that's classical culture. The British took that from the Greeks, and the Greeks have been asking for it back. And the British are like, but we took it according to the law by our law. So I don't know what you're mad about. Because they're like, well, we bought it from when a different empire controlled you, and they said it was cool. And then they're like, well, can you give it back? And they're like, no, we're still looking at it. I saw that joke from a comedian. I don't know who, but I just wanted to give credit where credit is due. And so, yeah, I would love to run that. As far as people, I don't even know. I mean, it's easy. I can just play with like the folks I played with already at like Stream Punks, which include y'all and Eric Campbell and Sam DeLev and Bonnie Gordon and so many people, Eliza and those are the people I started with playing with on the internet. And they're super cool. I didn't name them. There's them all. Like there's so many more people, and I don't have a running list of everyone. Like that would just be cool to run with them. Alternately, it would be cool to just play with like my friends,
Hell yeah.
I see. The thing is, like, I respect these like kind of folks who've been on like these shows or whatever, or like actors, comedy performers, voice actors who are on like Dimension 20 and Critical Role and all this stuff like that. There's also a part of me that's like, they already have a show, they already have a thing, and I would love to be able to play with them. But why not like get to play with the people that I'm most comfortable with? I don't need this. If you're giving me a fantasy show, I don't need the star power just to make it work. It'll work because Anita Noir already said, you get the show if it happens. What are your wishes? No monkey pawing, like then
That's
I'm like,
true.
hey, I'll play with the friends I like and know. It doesn't have to be like like the superstars or whatever. Like if they want to play also, cool. Also like one of my voice acting teachers, Zara Fuzzle. That would be cool.
I can't tell you how many people have picked like The Rock and Vin Diesel during this question. So that's a
Who
nice
would want
change.
both those two people at the same table? Oh my
I
god.
would. Can you imagine the drama?
It's not about making good table chemistry. It's about the spice.
Listen, we've all been at a table where it's just like there's uncomfortable tension and like there's tea going on behind the scenes.
I don't want to be like, I cast a spell. Whoa! Dwayne Johnson says you don't cast a spell. Dwayne Johnson says counter spell, and you're like, guys, we're on the same team. You have like the table agreements that we don't like do things over each other. Well, the Rock casts Prime 3 counter spell. The Rock unweaves Vin Diesel's spell.
Your spike.
That's not
Vin.
cool, man. Don't do that. I was trying to help the group.
Can you counter
You know what?
smite?
Instead,
I do today. Like, oh my god, that would be the like. I almost want to see like what table could we put together that is just the worst table chemistry possible, and I feel like that's a good start.
That is a solid foundation, yes.
active fighting, antagonizing each other in character, even though that's not the premise. No one listening to the DM or GM or storyteller, rules lawyering, but they have the rules wrong. The Rock has his own homebrew. The Rock has a homebrew. The Rock has a homebrew where he can get strength 8.
I think I thought of the most toxic table. All right, here we go.
Pitch it.
The Rock, Vin Diesel, Kanye West,
Oh no.
Ezra Miller,
Oh no.
and Ben Shapiro. I think that is the worst table possible.
Oh no, Ben would be like the rules lawyer who's
He
like
would be
really
the
bad at it.
Trying to rules lawyer Kanye West. What can you tell me, Ben? You can't tell me nothing. I'm a god.
That being said, the funny version of this, there's a great Key and Peele sketch from like season one where it's like this like nerd guy brings his like cousin who's just like a street dude to play D&D with him, and he's like they're like, all right, you enter a tavern, and then like his other friends are like played by you'll get like Alex Fernie, Eugene Cordero are at this table, like these comedy actors who they're just still doing sketches and stuff at this time, and his cousin is like, nah, I don't want that. You all got any Cristal? And like, the tavern keep says, I do not know of this Cristal. We have plenty of ales. Yo, give me some of those then. Where the honey's at? Like, and it's such a good sketch. It's so good.
Oh.
Chad is asking that you please burn that table to the ground.
Oh, and they also ask you who would be the GM. Like, who would be the most toxic GM possible?
You would need someone who both is very controlling, like railroading, but also cannot keep a table together. Like no one trusts their authority.
Oh God, I can think of one name, but it's like it's too toxic. It's like it's bad. But Trump as a GM would be freaking hilarious.
No.
It would be hilarious.
Oh man, I hate this with every fiber of my being.
I hate the energy that we brought to the studio today. I do not claim
Trump
this energy.
As GM, Ezra Miller, The Rock, Vin Diesel, Kanye West, and Ben Shapiro. You're telling me if a channel was like, we're gonna put on a one shot with these people, you not tuning in? That would be hilarious.
What's great is that like all of these are just what if you took like the tropes of bad role-playing game table players, like like at his core, The Rock is just someone who's gonna be like it has to be about him, right? Like, and you all know players like that, like the players who are like this story is about me no matter what the storyteller, the GM is saying, like I gotta be the center of attention. But like magnify that to like someone with The Rock's level of like exposure and like like being used to be having projects be centered on him, like
yeah.
And same thing with all these other people, right? Like, oh, just take the rules lawyer who's always debating you about the rules and make it the most annoying person who debates you ever. Like that's that guy.
I mean, the only person worse than
I don't believe you
that
can do
would
that
be
because
Jordan Peterson, as commented.
Oh, should we upgrade from Shapiro to Jordan Peterson?
Who's the real critical fail now?
I don't know if we can actually say that the fireball went off. I can't tell you why, but we should think about that because it really doesn't make sense with the way that things naturally occur in nature. Like, oh my God, it's just Kanye yelling in the background. And Ezra Miller just punching people and hitting them with chairs. I love it. Sign it up.
No.
Great. You turn this question from the best table to play at to the worst table to play at.
I think that table would be hell. I think that table should be a criminal. I think that table should be a criminal punishment where if you commit a crime, you have to do 4 or 5 sessions at that table. Just give me the chair.
I also hate the fact that you use the word upgrade in the same sentence as Jordan Peterson. Thanks, Danny.
All right, we have another question that we ask guests, and this one matters. This one's gonna hurt depending on what the answer is. So let's just jump right into it. In the TTRPG community, there is a silent war going on between folks who consider dice to be forbidden candies that you're meant to pop in your mouth and crunch. And then there are those of us that believe that dice don't go in your mouth because they're a choking hazard and they can ruin your teeth. We've been at bitter odds for how long have we been doing this show? 2 years now?
Yeah, actually, the first time that we asked the Crunch Crew question is coming up on the 2-year mark now.
First off, it's not the crunch crew question. That's a little biased, I think. So the question that we have for you, Quincy, is: do you crunch or do you not crunch?
Okay, I do not put my dice in my mouth, but I feel like if I started playing when I was like 6, then maybe like I'm just putting all sorts of toys in my mouth at that age, like
Yeah, but you grow up, right?
uh so what and this is speaking as someone who has an oral fixation. And all through high school, if I had a drink with a straw in it, I would chew that shit up. Like that
Yeah.
is, it's good that I never really took up smoking because, like, oh boy, if I started, it would not stop. Like, let me tell you what. But I don't know with dice. I think one, I actually don't enjoy the texture of like toy plastic, hard plastic in my mouth, not the
Yeah.
same way I enjoy like a straw or a spoon or stuff like or a chopstick. I don't chew on chopsticks either, actually. But that kind of thing, right? Like the kind of thing that you're used to like biting on or chewing on or whatever. Secondly, and maybe this is a personal preference. I don't have dice in delicious designs, like
Right?
Let me
Why
just.
tempt yourself into doing something that dumb?
like with like all the Tide Pod jokes from several years
Like
ago.
bubblegum?
See, right, like that looks delicious. I understand why one might be like, I'm tempted by this. That looks like orange cream, right?
Yeah.
Like my dice, I tend to favor cool colors. I favor like marbling. I guess marbling can be delicious. A lot of ice cream is marbled. But like teal or like teal and purple, which I think are great color combinations, but also remind me more of like Taco Bells from the 90s. Actually, I'm not making a good case for myself. They look more like the decor of a Taco Bell from the 90s as opposed to the actual food items. Um, so I am not a cruncher. Also, all right, question though, for anyone who is, when you say crunch, I feel like there's one thing between I put a smooth, clean thing in my mouth if like you take good care of your dice. It's not like off the table or whatever, but like there's one thing if I like have a smooth piece of plastic in my mouth because I can feel like that's a choking hazard, but whatever. But if you actively chew on them,
Yep.
that feels different. That's different than just putting an item in your mouth. Um,
They're saying they don't. They're not eating them. They're caressing them, which is just gross.
I mean, I definitely play with the dice in hand, right? Like there's certain people who are like so superstitious about the dice that they're like, oh, I'm gonna leave it on the 20 or on the 12 or whatever, and like I will let it sit there. I like energy. Oh, this dice has run out of 20s. I gotta switch dice. Like I'm not really that kind of person, but at a game, it's all fun. If you're having fun, that's cool. I am very much. I'm like, no, I'm gonna like stack my dice up. I'm gonna play with them. I'm gonna like move them around. I'm gonna like roll them in my hand. Like roll them in my hand as if they're like a stress ball. And like I'll do that kind of thing, which also means that half the time I'm like, sorry, I dropped my dice because I was just playing with them.
Yeah.
Especially
It's a good
which
fidget sometimes.
hmm?
It's a good fidget sometimes.
Yeah, at a live table it's fun because you drop it like on like on screen. You're like, oops, and I'm just doing this for like a minute trying to find it while people are like watching the top of my scalp.
See, I'm always self-conscious about that because I've seen a couple of like people like Bob Lowe, and it just doesn't look right. It doesn't look good. But I mean, look, listen, we all have fidgets, right? I'm fidgeting as we speak right now. But you know what? I'm not about to put this piece of vibranium in my mouth. That would be disgusting and an affront to my ancestors.
I believe based on the Black Panther movie storylines, though, they do have a little bit of vibranium in their mouth to prove that they're part of the crew, part of the
I mean,
nation.
that's a tattoo, though. I mean, like that's not crotching on vibranium.
What
And
would
then
happen if
I
you
have a
crunched on
gotcha.
vibranium?
you would destroy all your teeth, and you would never be accepted in Wakanda again. You get kicked out. You would have your powers stripped away, and then you would be kicked out of the village.
The final
unless
crunch.
unless you have vibranium caps.
Then it's okay.
The final crunch, you say.
But it sounded like to me you're on the side of stop the crunch, which is the more reasonable party.
If you're just putting it in your mouth in private, do what you want. If you're staying safe and you're consenting to dice being in your mouth, then you do you. If you're crunching them, I feel a little bit like, aren't you just damaging your dice if you're like actively
Right?
crunching them?
We're the dice protectors. In fact, we should stop being called from henceforth. We shall no longer be known as Stop the Crunch. Instead, we shall be called the Dice Protectors.
The dice defenders.
Yes, the Dice Defenders.
Someone else who I've played with, B Zelda, I think like they have mentioned before that their like dice look so delicious and they just want to eat them. And I'm like, please don't die. Just don't choke on your dice.
Don't do that. So I would be remiss if I didn't tell you that technically there's more than two sides to this war. I'm gonna cap it at 3. There's the Dice Defenders, there's the Crunch crew, and then there's the cowards that refuse to pick a side and have chosen to call themselves Crunch responsibly.
Be crunch responsible.
It's impossible to do an irresponsible thing responsibly.
There are candy dice.
Well,
actually, there are candy dice. I've seen these.
See, but that's the thing, though. Crunchers call eating candy dice crunching, and they don't want to crunch. They want to crunch.
Man, this brings a whole new level to games that are crunchy. It's like...
See, look, they even started saying it in chat. Candy dice are crunching.
But there's also, you also forget the 2 other factions. There is the Let Them Die.
By Kappa.
And
Kappa's cold-blooded.
I appreciate the wordplay, though.
Yes. And the Swallow Savior, where you just swallow the whole set. You don't
Oh,
shoot.
no!
You see my madness that this war has sprung?
I think we have created an indie one-page TTRPG. You know, the ones where you're just like which, and then you already have 5 factions. That's a lot of factions. That's already a full setting.
The
You have 2
dice
stats, crunch and not crunch.
Divine dice has fallen to the planet, and the crotchers are determined to crotch it, and the defenders are determined to defend.
Yeah, Swallow Savior was HTT Paladin.
Disgusting. But so yeah, it sounded like you're very much on the dice defender side of things, so I'll just mark you up as one of our own.
Oh no, I'm getting part of these factions. You're polarizing us as a community.
That's what happens when you have a 2-party system.
Oh, I have so many thoughts about voting systems, but that's like a whole different show, I think.
That's a different podcast.
Listen, I don't know if y'all were watching the midterm with your butt clenched, but I was. I was like, are they finally gonna do it? Are they gonna finally bring fascism officially into the U.S.? And we staved it off just a little bit longer. Thank you, Jizzy. You're a real one. We're at war always. Oh God. We've got maybe 2 more questions before we have the questions that we save for the Dark Roast. But there is a new segment that I'd love to bring up that our last guest actually inspired. In the Dark Roast, we're going to talk about that guy, somebody that makes playing the games, makes the space in playing games hard. But can you think of anyone that you would love to highlight? If there's someone that you would like to put on a platform so that people can appreciate their contributions to the TTRPG space?
Oh man, we'll just do an easy, low hanging fruit here. One, Eric Campbell. Who is someone,
so good.
We have all gotten. That's how I met you all, actually.
Yeah.
So the thing is, I've been playing games for a long time, since I was in middle school, and I think a lot of people play games that have played games for a long time, tabletop RPGs, play with like their friends or whatever, and that's great. And I do believe in the sort of adage that like you don't have to play at a like broadcast professional level if you're doing stuff where all your friends feel good, no one feels like frustrated or hurt or harmed, and everyone's having lots of fun. do whatever. And if whatever means that you don't have a very super like densely written like lore, or it doesn't mean that you're like doing voices and acting, you're just like, I go to the shop and the shopkeeper's like, I sell you a magic sword. And you're like, cool, I'm going to use this to go kill dragons. And that's how you have fun. Totally. You don't have to do like wild voices or whatever. And Eric's skill is actually, he has all the skills of like a broadcast level GM.
Yes.
Like he has voices and characters and writing. What I appreciate about Eric that I never even, this is like a subtle choice that is very normal for Eric's games, is that he just lets you pick what your scene is if it's like if it's not like a plot crucial scene, and maybe that works better for like when we're playing for an audience anyway. But when I was growing up playing, the GM was never like, tell me what scene would you like to have, like, you know, like no, that was never a thing that I grew up with, and maybe other circles did, right? Like this is the thing when you play before the age of like the internet showing you how other people play, is you're like, however you and your friends did it is just how you play. And I lucked out that I had friends that like played well with the style I did, and there was not a lot of like gatekeeping and stuff, at least not to me. Maybe they gatekept other people. But like, you know, but the first time I played with Eric, and he was just like, all right, like, you know, it's going to be another 2 days until you reach this destination. Tell me what scene you would like to have, and we can run that scene. And I'm like, what? Like, you can do that? You know, because usually it's like the GM is like, all right, great, next plot point we're gonna have, next thing that you need to know. Like, and it's very goal driven, even in a narrative game, right? Definitely like a D&D crunchy game. It's like, yeah, you're gonna get better gear, and you're gonna go solve the quest and do the thing, and detect traps and stuff. And then even in a narrative game, a lot of people are like, great, you now tricked the prince of the city. Next step, now you have to go give that information to the spy from the other, you know, from the other faction, from the anarchs of the city, you know, whatever. And like, and instead of be like, hey, we have time. Do you just want to like talk to you want to call your sister? You just want to call your sister? You want to do that? You want to eat lunch with your friend, and then like with the other character, and then you'll have a scene over lunch. We can do that. Just do that. And I'm like, whoa, you can just like, and it lets you really sink into the role playing aspect of it without just being like role playing is the thing I have to remember while I do a mission. It's like, no, you can just have a scene where you're just like, hey, you ever miss tavern style pizzas? They don't serve them in this city, you know, and you can just do that. And like, and I think that's wonderful.
Absolutely. I'm like, I mean, it's to add on, if I may, like, Eric has this just amazing ability to make you feel like you belong. And it's one of the coolest things. I'm like, I mean, when I first played with the stream players, I'm not gonna lie, I was mad intimidated. But like before I even realized I was comfortable, I was comfortable. And that's the side of just a fucking amazing GM. And like you're saying, like Eric doesn't consider Eric, it feels like doesn't consider your character to be whatever their class is or whatever their stats is. He treats them like a person, and that makes you act them out as a person. Like, I'm not just a pilot, I'm not just a medic, I'm this person. And so like when I'm not doing the flying or the medic stuff, what is important to this character? And that is masterful. And like, I think one of the funniest things about Eric is like he will spin this masterful tale, this episode that is just great, and like we're all emotionally like, oh, wow, that was a real wild ride. And Eric would genuinely be like, "Was that okay, guys?" Like, no, you just never forgot. Just great pick. I would definitely agree with that platform. Eric is the freaking man.
Eric is such a good GM. Like, just second to none when it comes to building a world and making you feel like you inhabit it.
I feel like that's like the real making you feel like you're important as a player slash character, a player character, if you will. You know, is like, I think that's it's a skill that I think it's nothing teaches you because it's very specific to this genre of performance or play, right? Like a computer game just immerses you using like stats and graphics and stuff like that. And that's a very skilled game, but that's because you have a limited set of choices you can make in a computer game, right? And then in like writing or acting, like it's written, it's based on the script or it's based on the director, but they're kind of giving you specific directions to go in. Or even if it's improv, it's like improv kind of comes the closest, but then you're kind of on the hook to do it yourself as team members, like creating a scene or whatever. And like with TTRPGs, someone's ostensibly in charge, and it can be easy to feel like that person's in charge as a like writer, director, everything, or it can be like that person's in charge to be like they're. This is something from improv too. Is like it's one thing to be like, here is my idea and we're gonna execute it. It's another thing to be like, here's my idea and I'm gonna get it out there in the form of softballs to the strengths of my players. And actually that's what you should, that's what you're supposed to be doing in like improv too. It's like you're not supposed to be there and be like, I'm outshining Noir, I'm outshining Anita. It's supposed to be, hey, Anita, I'm going to softball this to you so that you can knock it out of the park. Hey, Noir, I'm going to softball this to you so you can knock it out of the park. And that means I have to have an inventory, and that Eric has to have an inventory of what people, A, want to do as players, but B, what they are good at playing or performing or whatever, and letting you do it. And I feel like that's such this like nebulous soft skill, you know, that like there's no book that's just like, here are the 4 stripes of strengths players have, and then that's how you let them have fun. Like you just have to know your people.
Yeah, I'll go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I just go ahead. I'll ask.
I was just gonna say, like, to me, there's like two. I categorize everything, so just that's how my brain works. But like, there's the My World GMs, which can be good, like the GMs that like you're in my world. Here's how it works. And then there's the our world GM where it's just like, hey, let's put this all together. And I feel like Eric is like the champion of the our world GM. It's just like, hey, let's build this thing together. And it's always like, just holy crap, I can't believe that happened. And there are times where you can kind of tell, like, okay, this isn't what the plan was for this session, but like there's never that invisible wall that smacks you in the face where it's just like, hey, I didn't have this plan, so don't do that. It's just like, all right, let's see how logically things would progress with this choice. And that is just I love it.
And that kind of also leads into, because we're sort of touching on it. It's not really a standard question that we ask, but it's one that I'm actually curious about. What do you feel are your TTRPG strengths?
Oh, that's a great question. This is not my actual, I'm going to lead with what people may assume is my strength, and it's actually not. Because I got big Virgo energy, sometimes people assume that like, oh, Quincy's a really good rules lawyer. Quincy remembers all the rules. I don't. I really don't. One of the reasons I love voice acting is so I don't have to be off book for that. And the thing is, I'm the kind of both TTRPG player and an actor that I don't get the lines down by memorizing them off the page. It takes me a lot of extra effort to do that, like rote. I do it by just doing it enough. Like in plays or whatever, I just like rehearse until it's all in there. And in games, I know the rules because they're all in there. So people might assume that it's like, oh, you like know the rules really. Like, no, I'm just good at hitting Control F on a PDF when we're playing live. I think it's sinking into the character, not in terms of the depth of it, but in like I like finding little details for the character. That also comes from the improv training, like finding little ticks and like vocal styles. I love doing that kind of thing. And I also love like the right timing of scenes, right? Like that's also a skill that is going to be really variant table to table. I think we had to like kind of hone it in for the Star Wars game, but it's like, oh, when do you make entrances and exits? Like, and that's harder because in a full improv show, you can just do it. And in this one, you have to be like, hey, GM, I'd like to enter now. Or like, hey, is this a good time for me to do it? But when it works, I think it's so funny. Like, and that's something I've also pulled from improv world is like the comedy that comes out of just keeping track of details. And that's where my Virgo-ness really comes in. It's not like the game rules aspect. It's the like, there's so many fun scenes can be happening when a detail gets popped up, like, hey, Nora's character set down their pizza at the edge of the table, and then it's not talked about for a while, and then a scene happens and whatever, and then a fight breaks out, and then someone remembers to go, oh no, the pizza. Like, I love that aspect of it. I love remembering all the little details in a scene that are not actually consequential to the game rules, maybe probably not to the plot, but are just like, this would be a good time to remember that thing. I love doing that. I love like be like, this is a good time for this person to enter, or like whatever. Like, this is a good time for this person to exit. What would be the funniest but not harmful to the rest of the scene way for a thing to happen? That's my instinct, and I love playing that way as a player, at least.
That adds so much realism to the world too, though. I mean, there's nothing worse than like a detail being introduced and then just completely abandoned. Because audience members that are paying attention, some of them would be like, "Why did we spend the time to introduce that pizza if it's not going to come into play later?" And so, like,
Chekhov's
I
pizza, man.
Chekhov's pizza, like don't introduce an element to the world if we're not going to interact with it. And you know I'm not the best at remembering all the tiny details, so being in a game where somebody does like do what you do, you know okay, somebody drops my pizza, now I get to have the reaction of, oh my god, that was my pizza.
My
And
pizza.
it's my pizza, like, like it's the cabbage guy in Avatar thing.
My cabbage. They cast
You
the
know?
original. They cast the original voice actor to come back for the live action.
I
as
was so
Cabbage's
happy
guy.
about that.
James Sia, I believe.
But it's just like, that's how you get the cabbage guy. It's just like, somebody has to care about the details enough to realize, like, hey, there was a cabbage merchant, and you bumped into him, and it's the same one from the last village, and so he decided to leave. Leave the country, leave the kingdom to get away from you, and you did it again. Like, it's such a funny through line, and that happens from caring about the details. So
Comedy,
absolutely, I
that's
love
called
that.
a runner.
I love Reddit so freaking much.
Also, Avatar series, I would love to be cast in it. And when people are like, oh, but it should
Hell
be cast
yeah.
like accurately, whatever, like they're fictional, they are based in Asian cultures and indigenous cultures that are not limited to the Asian space also. But Fire Nation, everyone's like, oh, Fire Nation's clearly Japan. If you look at that architecture, that's Thai as fuck. You know what I mean? Like they're mixing a bunch of stuff on purpose. Like, that's kind of the thing when you make a fictional world. But if you look at those like Fire Nation temples or whatever, that's all Thai temple like little bits. Except Thai temples are like tails of Nagas, and then Fire Nations are like, we'll just straight up make it fire. But like, I'm like, oh, those are just like vaguely Imperial Japanese vibes from like the 19th century, but also the architecture and the vibes is like, yeah, but this is like a hot weather country. Japan's like not a hot weather country the way Thailand is. So like, you can, this is the vibe here. So I'm just saying, even though I'm also part Chinese, so Earth Kingdom is also cool.
Like, I don't think they could screw it up any more than they did with
Oh
the
no, for
with
the
the
original
movie.
live action one.
There was no
Wow.
live action movie.
That's the first time I've ever seen my mama cuss. Like full, like, I've seen my mama cuss, but like, she cussed M. Night Shyamalan. Listen, I don't know a bigger Avatar the last Airbender fan than my mom.
That is
And
wild to me. I did not expect that.
oh, my mom. Listen, there's the teaser trailer during the Super Bowl where Aang was just in this mountain temple with a bunch of candles and going through a bunch of, like, staff poses and blowing air to knock the fire candles out. All through the Super Bowl, we're just watching it. Me and my friends were getting hyped, like, yeah, touchdown. My mom's just sitting there having a good time. Nah, 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 nah. That trailer comes on. She's like, yeah. So when we went to go see that movie, it was a very quiet ride home.
No.
And then we parked in the parking lot. And I just remember my mom holding the steering wheel, like almost forehead on the steering wheel. And she went, "Who the fuck is on?" I was like, "Oh shit, we need it now."
I like how she says this. Like you describe this like the gravity of like you saw like a hate incident. Like
Listen, my mom is like as Christian, like too Christian. I don't love it, but she was full of the devil after that movie. She said some things. Oh boy, they trapped the Earthbenders on Earth, son. Yes, mom. Why? Why didn't they bend the Earth, son? I don't know, mom.
You having to be like, Mom, I don't know. I didn't make the movie.
To this day, there is a rant video that I send my mom, like as like a, "Oh, you're sad, here, let me send this to you because I know it makes you happy." And it's this white lanky nerd going off on the movie, and like the first time she saw it, she said, "Hey man, that's what I'm talking about." I have to send it to y'all because I've never. Listen. I'm not sure. We can move on after this, but like, oh, M. Night Shyamalan better never meet my mom or his hands on sight. But yeah, they can't mess up the casting any worse than they did for that movie. So yeah, hi, Iron Man, Quincy here for the Fire Nation. You wouldn't want to be Fire Nation?
No, I'm just saying culturally it would be okay for me to be Fire Nation. I as a person have much more Earthbender energy.
That's true.
I when I watched the sequel series Legend of Korra, I'm like, oh no, I'm Bolin. It's like,
I wish there were black people in Avatar.
I will support that move.
Can we get a hidden nation? Can Wakanda exist in heaven? We just been chilling doing vibranium bit.
I like how you didn't invent like a new like expanded world where there's like different like black cultures and stuff like that. You're like, no, just drop Wakanda in there.
Listen, we don't ask for too much. We just gonna put Wakanda everywhere. That's my end. That is my end canon explanation for any property that does not have black people, which is that Wakanda exists there and we just didn't leave.
They would tear it up with Lord of the Rings world. I mean, like,
where all the black people? They're in the Battle of the Ring, chilling in Wakanda, baby. Sorry, I can't see over here. We got vibranium blinders.
Yeah, but there was one land that the Sauron could not see, the land of Wakanda. And then like the music shifts and it's just the opening of Black Panther as it like passes through that cloaking device.
The elves are traveling west to Wakanda.
That is the Undying Lands.
Listen, if your property does not have black people in it, congratulations, Wakanda's there hidden somewhere.
Oh god.
Wakanda for everything, everywhere, all at once. Every universe has a Wakanda. If the writer didn't bother to put black people in this.
Decatane in chat, Danny is so good. Soren's eye shifts from his gates where his army's forming. Yibambe.
So I was looking at Wakanda and looking Black Panthers looking back, and I'm like, what? So I was like,
the eye immediately shifts.
Nope. My bad, dog. My bad. You know what? I almost like that like writers forget black people exist because it makes the theory really fucking awesome.
It is both your penance and a blessing.
You know?
It is your pet. Like you did not consider these people in your story, in your setting, so we will force you to take this one, but we're giving you one of the coolest ones.
Oh God, I'm just thinking of all the stories that have officially changed because of this theory. Oh goodness, oh, my headphones died. 1 second.
You're good. Ah,
Yeah, this really messes with the Jane
crying.
Austen settings. Like
Pride and Prejudice.
Mr. Darcy.
Mr. Darcy, I very much would like to attend tea with you. However, Mr. T'Challa has invited me as well, and
M'Baku has sent an invitation on behalf.
oh, speaking of M'Baku, that
Oh,
if Twitter is gonna go down, y'all see that one tweet that was just like it's just a whole headline thirsting over Winston Duke.
yes, it's my favorite thing on the internet.
If that's the last thing we get to see the last week of Twitter, you know what? It's been a good ride.
It has been a good ride.
I love how like we all complained about Twitter as long as we had it, and then like as soon as we realize we're about to lose it, it's just like, let's come together. let's come together one last time. And like there have been 3 reactions to Twitter going down, which is cussing out Elon Musk, posting nudes, or just trolling to the maximum. That's been it. Friends would be hella different show if T'Challa had enough of channel
Just like
enough with the sarcasm. I have had enough of you, child of Eden.
whether you are on a break or not, I do not understand. Can you not just communicate with each other? Like,
Where are other black people in New York?
I
Where
was
did they go?
informed.
Ah,
Took the water. God, Jesus Christ! I love this theory. This makes bad white writers secretly kind of awesome in my head because it's just like we figured it out. We figured it out.
oh, I love it.
And, you know, I love that. I love that we've introduced. Oh my God, I can't remember the new name for Atlantis from Wakanda.
Talokan.
Talokan. I love that. Like we're all just going. You know what? We all got our secret kingdoms. We're done with white folks' business.
Valid. Fair.
I mean, I'm super like. I think it's. I have not seen the new movie yet. I'm really excited to. And I do remember like this is not a one-to-one thing. Like I'm not here to take anything away from like Kugler and black writing and like the black like fiction writing experience. But when I saw that, I was like, oh my God, this is like a symbol of how you can write fiction for any like colonized, imperialized, like exploited people, and just be like, but what if we had a magic land that wasn't? You know, like in Southeast Asia also was a place that got real tore up by imperialism and colonialism, and I was like, oh man, like wouldn't it be cool if we had like a fictitious analog to this? I mean, it'd be even really cooler if we had a non-fictitious analog to this, but like,
Yeah.
you know, like, oh, wouldn't that be so great? Like, so I am all for it. So that's like the imagining an uncolonized land in those settings. But what you are doing, Noir, is like, but what if we make that uncolonized land exist in every other setting as well?
I mean, because if you think about it, officially in the MCU canon universe, there is a hidden indigenous culture, there is a hidden Afro community, and there is a hidden Asian community in Shang-Chi. So it's just like if you think about it logically, I would just wonder if all of the minorities in the US in the MCU would just be like, bye. Like, like, fuck this. going. I listen. If the MCU was real, there's no way I'm not booking a flight to Wakanda. I'm just. If I gotta put my whole life savings, I'll dig some. I'll dig some vibranium, baby. I'm not staying here. Listen, if Wakanda is real and they expose themselves to everybody, there's no way the U.S. is ever winning the Olympics again. Who's gonna beat? Who's gonna beat? Who's gonna beat Nate Namor and his squad in swimming in the Olympics? Not nobody. I love thinking about the way that this kind of stuff changes the reality of the everyday people that live in the MCU. And this is me nerding about something for way too long. So.
Yeah, all good. But we've been at this for about an hour and a half so far. Do we want to take a quick break and then we'll come back with the second half of the show?
The Dark
Dark
Roast.
roast.
Well, you're the producer, so you tell me.
Yeah, well, let's take a quick break. We'll refresh our drinks, do what we need to do, and we will be right back, y'all.
All right.
See you in a bit. All right, we're clear.
All right, mid break.
Ish. We're back. I gotta get the time. Like I said, I gotta get the timing right on these transitions.
Hey, it's all good.
This is what happens when you build things yourself and you don't know timing, and you're white.
It's all good. We love you anyway. Everybody, welcome to the second half of our show today, the Dark Roast. Here we attempt to get a little more serious, but you know, it goes however it goes. So I think the first question that I'd like to ask in our second half here is like a lot of your work is cultural based from what you've explained to us. Has there ever been a project where they were just so ignorant of the culture you had to like stop and really explain things to folks, where like you weren't brought on as a consultant but you ended up doing like a little bit of consultant work? Because I've had that experience.
Oh man. Okay, so luckily most of the stuff I've done is either they brought me on as the consultant, so it's like, well, at least you're paying me to do this, like this is the specific role I brought in, or and this is great when this happens. I actually just had dinner with her the other night, but there's a youth literature writer named Christina Suntornvat. She's based out of Texas, but she has a bunch of like middle grade and youth lit books, and they're like so good. The new book that just came out is called The Tryout, which is like semi-biographical. And she's Thai American, and she still got her publisher to hire me, another Thai American, to like double check her work, because just because we're both from a culture doesn't mean like, you know, because sometimes immigrant parents are like, it is our culture that you have to do this. It is our culture that you clean the table at this time of day. It is our culture that you like get good grades and like listen to us. And you're like, no, that was just them tricking us. That's like, we're not betraying a culture if we like don't listen to our parents. That's just what teenagers do. But so it was nice for that to happen. I'm trying to think of one that was like egregious. Luckily, nothing I've been on firsthand. But you know what? I'm also the kind of person who's like, I'm just not gonna take a gig if it's that bad.
Yeah.
Nothing that was culturally specific, but like, oh man, I did a play in college once, and it was a student written play, and before we get too far of like dunking on student written plays were some of the best works I did in college, but also some of the worst. And you know, one of the things we studied in theater in college was like, you know, theater has gone back and forth between being like everyone, including like poor people, including like, you know, laborers and whatever, knew Shakespeare, to like theater is only for the upper class, highbrow people. And there was a movement in the 19th century in like French theater where people were like, I know, we're gonna like, since the only people who come to watch theater are like rich, bougie, literally like bourgeois, like, you know, nobility, we're gonna make the first words in the show shit in French, like merde, and that would piss all of them off. And look, we're like challenging the norm. I'm like, okay, cool, that's like this thing that happened in France. Someone I did a play for in college was like, let's do that again. What will challenge and offend people? Except like, you're not offending like rich French nobility, you're offending like people who attend a college play. And the first words he wanted to come out of his play was motherfucking the slur for queer people, the slur for black people. And it was like, and we had all these like, because it's a student written work, which means that you have you're not breaking any rules by being like, hey, let's change it, you're right here, like and the rest of the show was supposed to be this like farce on like the George W. Bush administration, except the whole play was just like jokes about like them saying offensive things, and it's like that's not thought provoking about like what that administration did to people or like whether they're right or wrong or like how do we deal with this. It was just like an excuse for the writer to like, haha, like what if I write like these awful people and like people will laugh at them because they're like, it's I get to do that, and I kept being like, what? Can you change that? Like that's not good, and no matter what notes we gave to him, because there were like students of color that were in the show, there were students of color that were like in the committees that like approve plays or like let stuff go, although clearly not enough. And then and the thing is like writers like this just go like, yeah, but like was it funny though? Like is it funny? Like should I punch up the jokes? It's like, brother, these aren't jokes. Like these are just offensive things you say.
It's just hate.
And like,
and there's better ways to write. There's better ways to write compelling villains or someone you hate rather than making them outwardly racist or homophobic.
And the thing is, these are written. This is not a documentary, right? So like you, the writer, chose to use these words, and you said it yourself that like you did it to offend the audience, and you're like, it's the kind of galaxy brain thinking that a 22-year-old thinks is like, I will challenge the audience by offending them. Like, no, you're just like, that's not actually smart. Like, that's not actually like challenging and thoughtful and creative. Like anyone can anger anyone. You know what I mean? Like, that's not like, what are you making them angry at and stuff like that is like maybe the more skillful thing to do. And anger is not even always like the best emotion to use in an artistic context. But there's debates that can be happening about that level of work. All I know is that doing like spitting out like starting your play with like, oh, let's do the worst thing we can call a couple of different groups of people, and like that'll get their attention, like
well, it's edgy and thought-provoking though.
That was bad. So yeah, because of experiences like that, whenever it's like a later in my current career, if someone's like, come on and do a intentionally racist accent, I'll be like, no. And you know what? I'm not even anti-accent. Real people have real accents, and I think it's like a weird cultural norm that has been put into at least a lot of Asian American cultural spaces that like, hey, don't portray us with an accent because like accents, we've been taught that accents are inherently bad and we don't want to be portrayed as bad. I'm like, some people have real ass accents. The trick is that, are you doing that because it's like their real accent and it's like a character trait of that character or of that performer and we can honor it and not make it the joke? Or is the accent like swapping your L's and R's and like, haha, it's funny because they're foreign, like, and if it's the latter, I'll just be like, nope, not doing it. And I've done that to like, especially when it's low stakes. It would be harder, although I would probably still turn it down if they were like, we'll pay you like $10,000 to do this and you'll get royalties and then residuals. I'd be like, no. But this was for like a non-paid, like, we'll shoot this real quick sketch. And I'm like, no, definitely no now.
No.
Oof.
I think one of the important things to remember, if it's like either a role in a play where it's like supposed to be comedic or a voice role where like you're playing this off, you have to look at who's laughing.
Right.
Yeah. That's just, yeah. I whenever I think of stuff like the offensive accents, it reminds me a lot of like blackface and like the over accentuated like slang, which it's going down, but like even to this day, like there's still people who make their career off of like talking in AAVE, and it's very awkward, and it's like, that's not how you come on. Like,
there's folks from the spaces that I'm in that do it, and we're like, please don't. Like,
knock it off.
And yes, there's all sorts of discussions you can have about like did you actually grow up around blah blah blah? But like it's not any one single category or lane that you could be like, but I grew up around it once, so I can check it off and like I'm allowed to, and I'm also not a big language policer because it's like
Mm-hmm.
um as part of communities that are seen as like foreign and non-belongings a lot and like also come from like a lot of immigrant backgrounds that are more recent immigrants, a lot of times people are like, hey, well, this culture is not, it's not for yours to take. And I'm like,
Right.
that is fair and that is like thoughtful, especially if people from that culture say it. However, then I always think like, but why is white culture the dominant one that's okay for us to talk? Like, like
Yeah.
why is that normal?
Yeah.
And like, so we're allowed that one just because it's like normal. But so like language is like ever flowing and changing, whatever. But if you like put it on, and if you're putting it on, you know what I mean? Like
Like
if you're
there.
putting it on for effect or for like character or for whatever, and that includes whether it's from another country or I will subtweet someone right now, whether it's like you're Asian and it's also an Asian accent and you lean hard into it, even though that's not your real accent, and you use to win lots of internet points to dunk on how people make rice. That's as far as I'm gonna go detail wise.
Yep.
Like
I know
I don't
exactly
think
what you're
that's
talking about.
cool either.
I never considered that aspect of it, but yeah, like when I think of offenders like this, I'm thinking of like folks like Gwen Stefani, who like who like tried all different cultures like outfits. It's just like
Right.
one day one day I'm gonna be wearing the Indian culture, one day I'm gonna be wearing Asian culture, and then the next I'm from the Bronx. Like, come, please stop.
It's rough. And again, like I don't think there's like a specific checkbox of lines of whether it's okay or not. People are
Yeah.
complicated. People have different cultural backgrounds and different whatever and like surroundings and and if I were to only be limited to like stuff my specific culture introduced to English, it's like not a lot, you know what I mean? And even if I included the broad set of stuff, it's like, what if there are actually a lot of like things that in American English that come from Asian American dialect. This is like me
Mhm.
flexing my like cultural producer hat now. But like long time no see. Let's have a look see. The word boondocks. Like these come from Asian languages and or
Really?
Asian American language culture. Like long time no see and let's have a look see come from old like Chinese American pidgin. Pidgin being like a Creole language,
Yeah.
like like a mixing of
Okay.
languages, right? But like boondocks is from one of the Filipino or probably multiple Filipino languages, bundok, which just means like mountain, but that it's like implies that it's like the countryside there, and it got kind of because US be having wars in a lot of places, like people there like absorbed that word, and bundok became
Wow.
boondocks or like the boonies or whatever, right?
Yeah,
Like
I was just gonna say, like in black culture, like boondocks, we usually shorten it to the boonies. Like,
right,
that's all the way out there in the boonies. And like I love that marriage of cultures. Like
mm,
like I think learning about that stuff is helpful into like bridging gaps, because there are some places where cultures meet, and it's not appropriation. It's just like when you put two cultures next to each other, they sometimes start to mesh. And I think that we need to like do better in learning where we're meshing versus where appropriation happens. So
right.
I absolutely see your point there.
And that's why I feel like the whole structure of like lines and lanes is like that's a very limiting
Mhm.
idea. The trick is who gets the benefit, right? Who is punished for
Yeah,
being off a culture and who gets to make money off of being off that culture. That's the
absolutely.
real, and not just money, but like your brand or your fame or your reputation or being like you get to be an ambassador for a culture, and that's like not your own. Like why did you get to do that, right? It's probably because you're like, oh well, I learned it. I went for a year or I went for 3 weeks and I like learned it and I can present it now. And it's like, but the person who like is from that culture is expected to already do it perfectly, be like, well, they already do it, so it's not special, and then see a lot of times are like punished for it, right? Like, hey, you can't talk that way because that's not correct English, and we're going to give you bad grades in school now. And then, but this other guy says it, and now he's cool, and you're like, all right, like that's more the bigger issue than like cultures borrow, cultures mix, cultures synthesize. That's very normal. That's not the problematic part. The problematic part is like who did that and we're like, that's bad, you can't do that. And someone else was like, hey, here's a bunch of money. Because there's all sorts of cool stuff. I A couple of weeks ago on the internet, I saw someone like watching this video of like yakimein being made, and yakimein is like mix of like Chinese, maybe other East Asian cultures too, and like and Creole culture in New Orleans, where they like make these like noodle soup, except the only thing that's like it's like a Chinese style noodle soup, but also all the other fillings and like aromatics and stuff like that into the soup are like Creole ingredients,
Yeah.
and you're like, oh, this came from something. Like this came from like folks like sharing stuff and mixing stuff or living next to each other. That's not the bad part. The bad part would be like if someone then took that and like started a yakimein business in Wisconsin and was like, I am the king of yakimein, and I'm from neither of these two cultures or multiple cultures, and like I am now a billionaire off of it. Like I'm exaggerating, of
Oh, the
course.
amount of white influencer TikToks that take Asian recipes and water them down to be palatable for white people and then profit off of them is ridiculous. I hate it
And,
so
and
much.
here's the weird bad quantum mechanics analogy is that you can do it at home if you want. Under season all the food that you're eating yourself. That is your right. Um, Change stuff up. I change stuff up all the time to match my palate. That's fine. You're doing it at home. Do it with your friends. The moment you're doing it for money or even like showing it, and that's the quantum mechanics part, right? The moment someone else is watching you on like TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter, on whatever,
Yep.
now you're benefiting from it in some way until you get dunked on real hard. But much fewer people are getting dunked on, I think,
Yeah.
than are benefiting from it. So
And I,
again, it's not hard lines. It's just like just be thoughtful.
Yeah.
I would include clout as a currency. Like if you're doing something for clout, that I think that plays into this. Like if you're presenting like one of the things I hate the most on TikTok is where somebody will take a dish for somebody else's culture and go, "Ew, this is so gross. I'm gonna try and eat it." You know, like. And like I saw this white guy go like, "I'm gonna try and eat chitlins for the first time, guys. It's gonna be wild." And I'm like, that's Thanksgiving, bro. Like it's not that big a deal. If you like it, go for it. If you
It's
don't,
only bad if the next
don't.
video is
But
like, and now I'm going to present this much more refined dish, chitterlings, and you're like, that's the same thing. It's the same thing.
oh god, yeah, chitterlings, ew, gross.
How many times have
Makes
I
it
seen
sound
white
even
kanji
worse.
videos?
I
It's
mean,
it's
God.
rice porridge.
everyone eats porridge. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I was gonna say I don't dunk on oatmeal, but I absolutely dunk on oatmeal. I do not like oatmeal, but but you're allowed to eat it. You know what I mean? I call grits corn kanji all the time. I actually really enjoy grits. Um, you know,
Sweet or savory?
I'm a savory guy. I think we had this discussion before
Yeah, we did. We
before a
did.
game too.
Yeah.
Cheese, butter, shrimp,
I
put
gotta
it all
have
in.
mine
Because
with.
I'm that's partially why I don't like oatmeal. Is that I know it's possible to make savory oatmeal, but all the of readily available oatmeal in like the U.S. is like pre-packaged sweetened oatmeal, and I'm like, no, savory porridge. I want my porridge to have like meat and egg in it. Like that's what makes it good.
Fry an egg on
That's me.
top of your porridge. Yeah, that's good stuff.
I don't agree with y'all. There's been something in the background that I've been meaning to ask you about. So can you tell us a little bit about Asian Americana?
Oh yeah. So it's a show that I produce by myself. Well, mostly by myself. I'll have guest contributors on time sometimes, but and as such, in the 6 years it's been out, I have 22 episodes. So
Oh man.
it's not like a thing where I'm like cranking them out. Hopefully next year. Because I'm to crank more of them out, I have to like do less of other work. And my show pays me just whatever people donate. So it's not as much as like when I work for other people. But it's a show about Asian American culture and history. It's a long form style show, so I'm telling stories, and a big focus of the show for me. The reason why I want to do this is like there's a lot of other Asian American media content out there that is like, I think a lot of Asian Americans who feel like they're not seen, whether it's on big screens or even like internet screens, they go for like the most lowest common denominator stuff that is like not entirely inaccurate, but not holistic. You know what I mean? Like boba slash bubble tea. We love it, right? Like many of us do love it. I'm not going to say that's not Asian American culture, but it's not like the end all be all. And there's lots of people who don't like it. And there's lots of
Yeah.
other, culture variants. And it's also, why do we reduce ourselves to like just the most easy to consume things, literally, right? And so I've done stories that are about like these histories and stuff that people don't think about a lot or may not know. Or if you do know, this is your chance to be like, someone else knows, right? Like, and so some of that is like my first episode, my very first one was about actually PBS just did or our local PBS station just did a documentary on them too. This Asian American kind of, it started as a punk rock zine and became like a big arts magazine, and now just runs like a gallery and shop called Giant Robot. And in the 90s and 2000s, I saw this on like bookshelves and stuff, and bookstores in the magazine section, and it's just started by two guys, Asian American dudes in Los Angeles, and just like how it expanded to become this thing, and for them it was like, how do we make a magazine that's about like the things we like imported Godzilla movies and skater culture and punk rock shows and zines and local art, and I'm like, oh, but this is also inherently Asian American. Like these are Asian American people making it, and even though it's for a wide audience, it's inherently like Asian American by the way it's made. So that was one. There's my third episode was about a town called Locke outside of Sacramento in Northern California, and it was a town built by and for Chinese Americans, like a rural town. And this is a time when their like sundown laws were still in full effect in California and across the country, and like, so they were like, well, let's just build our own little rural town where we can farm and just live. And the town's still there, and it's really different now. A lot of those folks don't live there anymore. But I was like, no one thinks about like an Asian American rural town. Everyone thinks of these like kind of city Chinatowns. So there's like these like historical pieces, and then there's stuff that's just like, a lot of what I also want to unpack is the idea that like there's a one correct way to be like your culture, or worse yet, like Asian American in general. It's like, no, there's a lot of different communities and a lot of different places. And it's easy for me to be in LA and a lot of other people to be like, if you're in LA, the Bay Area, New York, like you have certain Asian American communities there, and you're like, and they must all be like this, right? It's like, no, they're not all like this. A lot of people grow up in different places for different things. One of the pieces I did recently, one of the more recent episodes is called Country Music for a Bannock Boy, and that's about my friend Tim, who is mixed ethnicity Lao American, Lao or Laotian. His family's from Laos, and he grew up in Ohio, and the white side of his family is from like Appalachia, but the Lao side of his family is like is from like, they were war refugees and stuff like that. And so what he was saying was like, he actually has this like strong relationship to country music. And a lot of Asian American may be like, country music, that's not for us. But for him, it was, because that was where his family was. And also his Lao side of his family is also rural people. And like the music his dad listened to was like Lao country music. It was just country music from Laos, but it was like the same kind of stuff, right? Living in the fields, living a slow, non-urban life. Where's my water buffalo? Like that kind of stuff, right? Like, and he takes this idea to be like, why does Asian American culture have to be like city culture, video culture, whatever? Like, there's also Asian Americans that live in like the Midwest and the South, and in the Southwest, in Oklahoma and Louisiana and Arkansas and Iowa and Ohio, like, and those experiences of them are not any less. And what I'm trying to say is like, they're not any less Asian American.
Yeah.
They are part of the tapestry. And like, so I'm doing stories like that. I'm doing like news stories, old like history stories, just really trying to unpack this idea that like, we're not all the same, but all of our stories are part of it, and we don't have to throw away the term Asian American just because what other people's conception of that is limited. What we can do is just expand what people's conception of that is, and that's what I'm trying to do with the show.
Heck yeah, that reminds me of a conversation that I had with a friend of mine who was just like, "Do you truly understand how big Asia is?" And I'm like, "No." It's just like they really, really took me through. Like, there's so much culture and so much space, and I think that here in the States we have a tendency to like regulate Asian culture to like two or three cultures, which is really like it's minimalizing a lot of people and a lot of experiences. And so like I love anytime, someone takes the time to put a spotlight on a lot more of the experiences that exist that we've been privy to, because there's so much there. Like the friend of mine was KP. He was kind of taking me through like, we associate Bollywood with like all movies coming out of India, but it's really just like one section. And there's so many more.
There's so many Hollywoods out of
Yeah,
South Asia, out of like just India alone, not even counting, and that's only like the big industry scenes, but they have like
right,
half a dozen or something like that. There's like Bollywood and Tollywood and all these things, and that's only
right.
the big scenes, not even counting whatever they're like
They
art
have their
films,
own
you
indie
know?
scenes and
Yeah,
everything as well. So it's just like, that would be like somebody saying, somebody conflating all of the states to like California and New York. Like it's just like
and
there's
one of the things I'm trying to like really hone in on is that like that's these cultures from these other places, but the Asian American version of that, like I have a story about like the South Asian person's like love of Taco Bell, and that's actually a very common thing because like Taco Bell was like a fast food chain that A could make a lot of things vegetarian. B, if you had to describe it to like a South Asian parent, like what is this Taco Bell? Like, well, it's a flat, crispy piece of dough, and then they put beans and cheese on it
Yeah.
and like a vaguely spicy sauce, and then they put another flat piece of dough on it, so it's like kind of crispy and like, and they're like, okay, the thing you described is not weird to me, like,
Yeah.
um, and so they were discussing like why they grew up loving Mexican pizzas from Taco Bell so much, like, and I'm like, loving Taco Bell is not a thing in India, but it is sure a thing in like South Asian America. You know what I mean? Like, and that's a kind of like details and stuff that I love to explore and stories I love to explore. Like, what is it when you're like specifically Asian American that isn't necessarily experienced this way outside of our communities here, but definitely in Asia, they're like, what is a Taco Bell? What are you talking about?
I I love that Taco Bell is the example used. I fast food in other countries is like I think the experience of a McDonald's in anywhere else. I kind of want a podcast that's just about the experience of going to McDonald's all over the world, because there are some offerings that some of them have that are just wild to consider.
I miss McDonald's poutine with every fiber of my being.
You had poutine in McDonald's in Canada?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That's
It it sounds like so wrong to like authentic Quebec poutine, but the McDonald's poutine is like it hits. It's so good. I
Ceci n'est
don't
McDonald's
pas
had
un poutine.
poutine.
huh?
Like,
I didn't know McDonald's had poutine.
In Canada, yeah.
oh man, every Quebecois person is like, what are you talking
Listen,
about?
I first had it in Montreal and I was like, this is so wrong, but so right.
Yeah, you're losing your Canadian card the
In
longer you stay here.
in East Asia, it's KFC has to up their game a lot because a lot of East Asia and Southeast Asia already has fried chicken and cheap.
Which
So if you're
uh
yeah, if you're gonna pay like a restaurant price for fried chicken, they have to offer something really different than just the thing you can get on the street for $1.
and a lot of the fried chicken that is in like in Korea specifically was brought there by Black American GIs.
I mean,
The
I
frying methods, yeah,
Yeah.
it had chicken, but I mean,
I when I went to LA, I was taken to like all of the Korean joints there. And I learned that, American GIs and Koreans kind of got together and shared chicken recipe, which I love that for us.
And it's that
Although-
thing that we sort of touched on earlier, where like there's that line between like appreciation and appropriation.
And like new cultures develop all the time. Like that's something that's also hard for a lot of people is like, oh, if you make this food, it's got to be the original way. And I think that that's done because when people learn it and they're not from the culture, that's how they justify that their way is fine. It's like, well, I make it the traditional way. I make it the original. I make it the way that was taught to me. But if you're from the culture, any way you make it is inherently from that culture. But then you should be allowed to like mold it and change it and shift it and synthesize it with other folks. But then it also becomes this thing where it's like, then other people will be like, well, that's not authentic. That's not traditional. Like, I'm the authentic person. You know what I mean? Like, I'm making it. It's inherently right. You don't have to like it. You don't have to make it this way. You don't have to eat it. But you can't be like, it's inauthentic because it comes from a person who's from the culture, you know?
I love just hearing about when cultures mesh because like we're so like in different camps online that it's wild to think of like two different groups of people being like, "Hey, I like that thing you do. Yeah, and I like that thing you do. Let's trade." Like it's like I'm so used to hearing stories about colonization and just like that kind of stuff that when two cultures sit next to each other and can have those kind of relations, like that's I feel like that's the antithesis of colonization. It's just where two groups just want to vibe.
Like sometimes it's like, oh, it sucks that those things are like tied together because like it didn't have to be like this. You didn't have to be like, let me take over your land and then give you fried cuisine. Like you
Yeah.
could have just given us the fried cuisine, right? Like
Exactly.
a lot of Japanese like tempura and fried cuisine comes from Portuguese influence. And if they just stopped there, we would have been like, cool, y'all dope. But like they didn't stop there, right? Like so like
They had to also bring in
like
imperialism into the mix, and
yeah, yeah.
I feel like that should be the name of like the quintessential history book, which is they didn't stop there.
they could have stopped there, but they didn't. That's how you end
Oh,
every chapter.
And then things got bad. Like just I mean, that's I have to say like being somebody that study history, I kind of wonder what your thoughts are on how we teach history in in this country because I think it's ass awful. Because it's just we don't want to talk about the bad parts. And as somebody that knows like the bad parts, like do you have any kind of thoughts on like the damage that we're doing by being ignorant of the truth of our history?
It's like so multifold, right? It's that like
Hmm.
we teach it like it's this obligation that no one actually wants to learn. When history is like it's it's the best world building of all because we have so much actual documentation for it. Like y'all love settings, y'all love world building. Guess what? We have like an infinite amount of like source material for this one. And the thing is, like, a lot of it is that people are taught a simplified version of stuff, and often a like whitewashed or a otherwise like modified version of it. And I get it in the sense that like if you're talking to a 5-year-old, you don't want to be like, anyway, here's these like heavy text, and we're gonna go through everything. But the it's a dual thing of like one, you could explain to them like simplified but not change the intention. Two, we have to allow ourselves, and schools should teach people how to figure out that you're going to get taught a more nuanced or a more challenging version of a thing again later on. And what a lot of people do is like, but that doesn't match what I was told early on, so I'm gonna fight it. And sometimes schools and stuff will be like, all right, then never mind. Well, then we won't teach it to you this way. And it's like, I think so at core, yes, like we should be teaching a more nuanced, thoughtful history about like, hey, not all the things that we did was good, and but it doesn't make you bad. It only makes you bad if you agree with the bad. or defend the bad, or say actually the bad stopped so I don't have to care anymore.
Yeah.
Like that's the bad part. But it's okay for you to go, hey, I was taught that Columbus discovered this place, and actually it turns out there were hundreds of millions of people already here, and actually Columbus was not good. Like I think people should be allowed to and to give the space to like process that because they
Yeah.
were taught one thing and they were taught another thing. The problem is that sometimes the teachers or whatever will just rush it through, be like, all right, now learn this thing again. And then B, some people will be like, well, I don't want to believe that because it doesn't match what I was taught when I was 7. And you're like, hey, the thing that you're taught when you're 15 or 22 or 30 or 60 or whatever, hopefully has more nuance and gives you more room to process it than the thing you were taught when you were 7. So we should probably be teaching the 7-year-olds a better thing, like a more accurate thing. But B, like we shouldn't be so like up in arms to be like this thing is different than what I already know, therefore I reject it. Like it doesn't also mean that everyone's going to tell you the exact correct thing, but just give ourselves room to like figure it out, process it, understand how it impacts people. And again, like back to the world building things, like a lot of the stuff where we're at now, like you can understand it so well if you look at it as like lore of our real world of
I
how
never
we
thought
got
about
here.
looking at history like lore, but that's a really great inspiration to learn learn it.
And getting all these like deeper versions of things, right? Like you I mean, a lot of people are not taught like or they're taught a version that presents a certain thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like the classic example in like civil rights history and American civil rights history is like Rosa Parks. They're like, oh, she's just this tired lady who refused to stand because she was just tired, and like, no, she was trained by organizers. You know, she was trained by like people who are like, all right, who is the person who's going to be like, you know,
The face for
if
this.
like the face for this specific action because there's a lot of actions happening all around the country, and it's also like who if they do this will people will be like, hey, did you drag an old lady off a bus? Like what is your problem? Versus if there was like a bunch of young men or whatever, they'd be like, well, they should be able to walk even though like everyone
Yeah.
should be able to take the bus, man. Like you know, like
Um,
and stuff like this, right? Or the idea that like you know, Black Panthers are this like militant group and blah blah. They were militant, but you know what? They were militant because they were like seeing people get killed in their community, and they're like, how do we defend these people? Or they were like, but there are also the people who are like, the most radical thing we can do. Provide free lunches in Oakland for students. You know what I mean? Like, because
yeah.
that was radical. Like,
Yeah.
give free food to students who are poor. And so, like, there's all these nuances. It doesn't mean everyone's inherently perfectly good or perfectly bad. Slavery is perfectly bad. 100% bad, no argument. But like individual people, like are a product of their context or whatever. But it's all lore. Like if you look at it that way, then you can understand like why people do things and you can then separate this idea that like these things were bad, but you don't have to defend it just because you're from an area or from a background. You can be like, hey, the bad thing was bad, and we want to do better.
I'm,
And because we understand how it's happened.
it's still wild to me how many people equate the Black Panthers with the Ku Klux Klan. Like the propaganda that yeah, listen, they're out there. Like I'm dead serious. Like there are people like I don't fuck with the Black Panther. I don't fuck with the KKK either. And it's just like they are not the same thing. But that's the effectiveness of the propaganda that was thrown at them, and it's lasted all these years. And if you take a step back out of like how it connects to you as a person and take a look at it like lore, like if they're a group of dwarves that were tired of the oppression of elves, and so they armed themselves and began to feed the impoverished dwarves of their own community, and the elves didn't like it. Like if you kind of like, I know it's very silly, but it's a perspective of looking at history that I never considered. And I think like that would be such a wonderful way to be taught history. Not with replacing real people with elves and dwarves, but just presenting it like lore instead of all the politics that we have surrounding it, which is just
I mean, it's hard, right? Because it's
Ugh.
inherently political. It's about like power and who gets benefits from society and who gets trashed on and like whatever. It's hard to divorce that, but it's also like we don't have to resist. Just like learn all the pieces and let it stew and like figure it out. Like I think that's the other thing is like school rushes you to like, hey, learn these as facts as we're gonna test you on it,
Mm-hmm.
as if we're like as if your skill at memorizing the dates is more important than like understanding like, hey, these attitudes got really popular at this time as a reaction to this, but who are they pointed against, right? Like and so much of that is like that's the actual dynamic of those things. Who are we taught to hate because they want to point us there instead of pointing at someone else who was like powerful and didn't want their power threatened or whatever.
Yeah. And 1 second, respectfully, I've got somebody heckling me in my own house. Shut up! All right, so sorry, we're having an enlightened conversation. They're holding up a sign that says "Boo, we want Anita."
We do want Anita though, so
I mean, I also want Anita as well.
Listen,
Like,
this is very nuanced and beautiful conversation that is about race, and I am a whole white person, and I know best to stay the fuck out of it.
okay. I think I think
The
with
heckling is
this
coming from inside
display,
the house, yes.
I think with this display of douchebaggery, that brings us to our next topic, which is if you have been in the TTRPG space for long enough, chances are you have had the displeasure of playing with that guy, which is somebody that is a veritable black hole of fun at the table. Somebody that if they were yeeted into the sun, your experience at the table would increase 100-fold. So Quincy, I have to ask you, have you experienced that guy?
I am lucky in that a lot of them, I haven't played with like the broad range of anyone who's ever played TTRPGs, right? Because I feel like there's stereotypes and archetypes and common things that come up in like the broader realm of where people play like that. And luckily in my adulthood, I have never played with like a trash table or even like a trash player. Like I'm very, very, very blessed in that way. But I feel like when I was coming up, here's the thing, like when you're a teenager and you play with other people who are like just even older teenagers, like the tendency sometimes is like, oh, we're playing adult mature games, so we can like introduce like adult themes into this thing. And it's like the adult themes that like a 16-year-old or a 17-year-old thinks is like real mature. So
Yeah.
for me, it's like that kind of thing, right? It's like when you want to introduce a level of like whether it's like hyper violence or sexual content or any other things that are just like edgy topics that like I want to empathize and understand that if you're like a counterculture 17-year-old, you're like edgy is my vibe. But like looking back on it, and even then I was like, it doesn't have to be. No one's making you. And so I guess instead of any like specific one that guy person, I'm gonna just target anyone broadly who's like, I'm gonna introduce content to a game. Whether and often this comes from either a player or like the storyteller GM person. Like I'm gonna like, nothing preventing you from having that topic if like everyone at the table is cool with it. And like I think there's just so many more safety tools now, like X cards and like actually discussing what a game's theme is about. Because back when I was playing in high school, it would just be like, make a character and we're gonna have a game. And you're like, I don't know what the game's about. I don't know what I'm making my character to. And sometimes it'll just be a mismatch. I definitely made someone ran a Hunter game, Hunter the Reckoning game, and that was pretty chill. But it was like themed to like Buffy. And then
Oh,
before I
hell
really knew
yeah.
that was going to be the energy, I made a character named Paxton, who was like a pacifist. And like, and then all these action scenes, I was like, I'm just doing a bunch of fucking nothing here, other than being like, oh no, fighting! I gotta get out of the way. And I'm like, oh no, am I Xander? Like, what's happening here? Like,
Ooh.
and so and that's a game that like no one was like doing anything that was pushing buttons that pushed me as a player, as a person, but it kind of sucked to be like, oh, by the way, it's like a Buffy style heavy action game, and I'm like, oh, then I would have made a different guy.
I came here for feels.
Yeah, and that's for that like light end. A much heavier end is just like, when someone's like, hey, make a character, like, okay, great, my character's a school teacher, and but he also has like magic powers on the side. And you're like, great, this game is about like assault and like, and like harmful things that happen to people, and it's all super edgy, and you're like, ugh, I wouldn't have made Mr. Rogers character, like.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm just imagining like Mr. Rogers in Game of Thrones.
Well, we should maybe we can talk with each other, have a better understanding.
That's not the kind of relationship you should be having with your family members.
Or just like fetal position in the corner, like land of make believe, land of make believe, make believe.
Is Westeros enough to break Mr. Rogers?
Or is it like, does it invade like the land of make believe? Like King Friday just gets stabbed real hard, and you're like, oh no, King Friday!
Now I'm thinking of the land of make believe, but it's Game of Thrones.
I think we stumbled onto
a sketch. Actually,
I think we stumbled onto $1 million idea, guys.
Just like Prince Tuesday, except it's still puppets. I still want it to be puppets.
But
course. It's like, Father will never let me take the throne, so I've come to you.
Oh no, it's basically just a crowd of candy from Dimension 20, but like with Mr. Rogers' neighborhood.
Oh god. Mr. Rogers gets hired to entertain young Joffrey. How long does he survive physically or mentally? I think, and this might be misconstrued, but I believe Mr. Rogers could have turned Joffrey around.
I believe in the healing powers of that man. And
yeah, mission. Like when the race wars start, taking out Mr. Rogers would have been the hardest part of it. Like there's just a few that just like, oh, it's gonna hurt to lose you. Taking out Tom Hanks won't be easy. That's Forrest Gump, y'all.
I don't know, man. Mr. Rogers doesn't get a pass.
Oh, all right. So that's bringing us close to time. Are there any last questions that you'd like for us to ask, audience? And Anita, do you have any other questions?
One more of our standard questions that we haven't got to just yet.
Oh snap! What did I miss?
You missed two actually, 2 sections. You missed Tabletop Confessional.
Oh, that's true.
And you missed the God Emperor question.
Oh, that okay. We'll start with God Emperor. All right, Quincy, you wake up one day, you are the God Emperor of the TTRPG space. You can make any 3 things happen, no matter how big or small. You have infinite resources at your beck and call. You are the God Emperor of the TTRPG space. What 3 things did you make happen?
Oh man, you said God Emperor, but you're like on the TTRPG. I was like, and homelessness by building public housing for everyone, socialized healthcare, like, well, I guess make Matt Mercer build houses for everyone, and like, Matt. Okay. I'll do the classic like 2 big swings and like a softball. Big swing 1. Full transparent pay scales that is equitable across the board for all participants who do it for a living. That's big swing 1. Big swing 2. Just will into existence or greenlight a bunch more games and designs that come from just even more communities. Like it's neat that a few games have been trickling up that are like themed to different people's experiences and ideas and stuff like that. Just more like more of those readily available. I got to play Coyote and Crow with
so good.
with Eliza as a one shot. Eliza Pearl, also amazing GM, amazing player person. And I played with them as a one shot for Streampunk's fundraising thing, and that's like Canadian Crow is like made where like I'm pretty sure by indigenous like creators, writers, and set in a world where like the continents that we call the American continents are like never colonized, and so these people that were already here develop into its own like society and world, but then they like still continue it forward to be like, what is their sci-fi like, what is their cool setting like stuff like that times a million. Like I want that for Southeast Asian stuff and like Black culture stuff, and like in the US, and like in different indigenous peoples all around the world, or just different subcultures, different whatever, like no matter how micro or macro, you know what I mean? Like you want to make a RPG about running a local tea shop, yeah, I want to see that. If you want a huge one where it's like, hey, what if RPG where reparations happen, what's that world look like, like yeah, I'll play that, or watch it at least, you know what I mean? Like,
Oh my
so
god, that'd be sick.
Free ideas, everyone. So those are the two like first two things. There's a two big swings and a softball. The softball is my reverse Indiana Jones game can be played. This is not that hard. If I really wanted to play it, I just have to gather the right people, make them learn mage, and then play it. But you know what? What better time than when you're the God Emperor of TTRPGs?
See, there you go. I actually had a game where Indiana Jones was the BBEG, but we called him Georgia Jonas. They killed
Named after
this
the dog.
They killed the shit out of it.
Twice.
Twice. All right, and for our final question, this is the TTRPG confessional. So if there's a habit that you have at the table that is a little less than a piece, like what is your closest to that guy habit that you might have? We'll listen to it and then we'll offer penance. I will go first because I like we lead by example here. I have a tendency to play characters that mash their foot on the gas when the party is waffling and taking too long to decide, and that can be somewhat abrasive, especially when people are trying to have character moments. So it's just like, like if we're trying to choose, do we go through door A or door B, and we're just like, well, door A might have this and might have that, or door B might have this and have that. I have a tendency to play a character that's like, well, we can't make a choice, and I kick the door down. So
one of my favorite examples of that, though, you weren't the one that kicked the door down. You put the decision on someone else. You said, it was in our very first game together. Well, one of them in one of the episodes in that series. You said, listen, we're taking too long. Hey, Odd, you decide.
Okay, yeah, I do remember that. I mean, I felt like that was a way to have my flaw and eat it too, I guess. So please give me my penance. The both of you can pick something, anything. I will adhere to the will of the people. What should be my penance for my sin?
We don't need to make you like crunch your nicest diet or anything, right?
Listen,
No.
it could be anything but that. I refuse to crunch it. How dare you even think of it?
I'm gonna say that your penance in this is to say 3 holy mercers.
Our mercer who aren't in Burbank. Halloween.
I want you to, in your next game decision, bust out a whiteboard and make a pro and con chart, but for a decision that's not actually like a game plotty one, right? Not like like, do we save this person or do we like do this other mission? I want you to do it being like, all right, so if we take the northern highway, like it's gonna be,
I have to become the thing I hate. You know what? I will take that, and I will actually write up a Hell Mercer, and I will recite it 3 times. Anita, do you have a confession that you would like to present to the table?
Ooh. Um. Listen, a lot of times I say that I'm prepping. I'm not. I come up with these ideas 3 minutes before showtime.
Ooh. Oh, you're an empty notebook, GM.
Do you want to see what my notes were for our squirrel game yesterday?
Yes.
Let's have a look at you. Uh, let's see. Uh, I had the names of each character, and then I had the name for the capybara.
That's it?
That's it. And I didn't even have who was which character written down until yesterday. I just had the names written down.
That's gonna okay. I'm going to my penance for you is that your next session, as either a GM or player, you have to take notes for that session.
My weakness. Okay. All right.
I want you to draw a map of your next setting and label relevant locations, not only in the world but to the player's specific like thing.
I will say, okay, here's the deal. I did have that. Also, was in a session 0 the other week, and I took very like extensive notes of the session 0.
Mm-hmm.
And also, I took very extensive notes during I Have a High Ground on Tuesday.
Well, because of your penance, you're gonna be taking excessive notes on session 1 with a map.
All right. Okay.
I like how you tried to get out of your penance. You're in the confessional, like, but Father, what if I had already done
What if
a
I
couple of
already
Hail
done
Marys
this?
before I got here? Like, does that?
No, I was
That
like 90% of a way through a rosary, so I'm good, right? Like,
I suppose
Like, I've already.
that is a second sin of mine is I'm argumentative at the table.
Ain't no times.
I
Ain't
like
no
to
time
be like,
served
hey,
in heaven.
hey, listen, I know that you want me to roll this, but can I argue for this because this would work a little bit better with what I have planning, or a little bit better for me and the stats that I have.
You just added another sin. I gotta give you another
All right,
penance.
give me more penance. Hit me.
You have to take. You have to take a. You have to give yourself disadvantage when it would fit your character in your next session.
All right, sounds good. All right.
Quincy, it's your turn.
This gave me a lot of thinking to do. At first, I'm gonna do stuff that's like I don't actually think is a big deal because I usually suppress these urges. Like sometimes I'll want to, as a player, like it would be cooler if we did this, or worse yet, it would be funnier if we did this after it's already happened. That's kind of frustrating. But I usually just like suppress those. I would be like, keep it in the brain. Or the other one is like, I had a really cool thing planned, and then some noir style player will be like, I punch him. You're like, oh, okay. Well, that kind of negates my whole plan. But that's also like because I don't like act on it, so I'm not gonna count that as a problem. My problem is I'm gonna relate it to the reverse of Anita's, which is when I plan games, I will build settings and stuff like that, and I don't railroad my players. Part of the way I plan games is the way I do improv and the way I do travel planning. Weirdly enough, it's like let me build a bunch of things into this world, and I know where I would guide them if they don't know where to go. But if they go elsewhere, it's like that episode, the second D&D episode of Community, where David Cross, I think, is the character. He's like, what if we don't want to follow your rules, huh? Like, what if I go off the road? What then? And Abed goes, takes out a huge binder, goes, thunk, I have a few notes for that. And he just like, so I'm kind of that, except I'm also like, whenever I have to come up with a name for someone I didn't plan for them to talk to, like I have the names for like the big bad, the important characters' friends, the big bad's bodyguard. That's all good. But sometimes I'll be like, I want to talk to the valet guy who's parking my car. And I'll be like, oh, okay, cool. And he's like, oh, happy to help you. And like, oh, what's your name, man? I'll be like, So and it'll just be like Carl, like I, God help if they ask for a last name like Carl what? Like, oh, I hate you guys. And this is hard enough in like, and this is one really bad for an improviser to not be able to come up with names. Like when I coach teams, I'm like, you guys have to be able to come up with names that are not just your names and not just like Billy and Sally. But then it's extra hard. Like when I ran a 5-year D&D campaign, start to finish, 1 to 20. It was monthly, so it was like helpful that way. But like whenever they would ask for a name, I'm like, I gotta come up with a fantasy name. I can't just be like Carlos, you know what I mean? It's like, oh, what and what pray tell is your name? Falorion Tull. And I was like, oh, now I gotta write that because they're gonna be like, I go back to Falorion Tull to
How do you spell it? Like, I don't know, I just made it up.
I'm like, well, in the local dialect language, they would write it Falorion Tull. In English, it's however you think. Or alternately, if I say a name that I have written and they're like, they write it down and I'm like, actually it's spelled with an H. It's like, how would they know? It's a fantasy name. It's D&D.
In local script, it's spelled ADAM.
Gosh.
In ancient draconic language.
I hated you for naming your character Festerburger, Hoosier. Do you know how many practice trials it took me to get that name right?
Eugene Festerburger.
All right, so it looks like it's time for your penance.
I have a penance.
Okay, let's hear it.
Your penance is to write down a list of random NPC names and random NPC last names, and then cross them off as they come across.
You took my penance. All right, I want to just add one caveat to your penance if I can.
Okay.
The names rhyme.
The names rhyme. Because they're names, it's almost easier than when you're trying to it's not like you're freestyling and you're like, oh, why did I say silver at the end of that sentence?
You must introduce your party to the Minotaur. Doogle schmoogle.
Oh, you mean internal rhyme?
Yeah.
I thought you meant the list of you guys talk with Doug, Mug, Bug, and Rug.
No, the first name and the last name for at least 3 of the NPCs have to rhyme.
Oh man, that's all fun and games for D&D, and then now my vampire game's gonna be like, you meet the Sabbath member. He's a tall Zimisi in Zulo form. He's like, I am Libble Bibble.
Listen, I'm already invested in Libble Bibble. 6 seasons in a movie for Libble Bibble.
Libble Bibble's gonna fuck up the Camarilla.
But I mean, no, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, you go ahead.
I was just gonna say that one of the examples that you used is I can't do Carlos. I'm like, add an H to the end, Carlos, and make it a K. There you go.
I also just stole that from the last episode of Freaks and Geeks where he was like, I play Carlos the dwarf. And you're like, you can't name a guy Carlos. It's like, why not?
It sounds like VTM I'd watch the hell out of. That's true. You did put me through. There's a reason. Okay, so.
Oh, God.
So, we had a game early on in the channel. We played 3 kobolds in a trench coat. And Noir kept adding to the name until eventually it broke the overlay because it went off of the screen. Noir's final name was His Royal Majesty Holiness Sir Dr. Bebop Scallywop Steve Perry Esquire III, Jr. of Chicago. And that is his name in my phone.
Your contacts app is like, why? Why must you do this to me?
Please stop! Siri, please reach out to
That could have been calculus, but no, it is seared into my brain. His Royal Majesty Holiness. His Royal Majesty Holiness.
He was a pope who was also a doctor and a lawyer.
Uh-huh.
Wow. Making it hard. All of his cousins really hate him because he's like, your cousin's a pope doctor.
His But all of the S's were Z's. So it was His Royal Majesty Holiness Sir Dr. Bebop Scallywop Steve Barry Esquire III, Jr. of Chicago.
Yes,
I
also
mentioned
Steve
eating
Perry
like
because he.
kings, and then he had to become royalty.
Now you have to do is like, how do you localize that name to like Welsh or German? Like,
Yeah, that's your opinion, Anita. You have to localize that name for at least 3 different languages.
Listen, I'm sure that there's probably like a weird German title that I could come up with for that.
man, you know it's bad when a Thai person's like, yo, that name's long, man.
Oh, you know what?
Yeah.
I think that's a perfect point to land the plane. Unless anybody else had anything else they'd like to say, or forever hold your peace. Joy sucks. All right, so that brings us to the end of the episode. I've been one of your hosts, Noir. You can find me all over the internet as TheNoirEnigma. That's Twitter, Twitch, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram.
Turn it off. You're not gonna live.
YouTube, Instagram, or OnlyFans if you nasty. Oh, please, Anita, go ahead.
I've been your other host, Anita. You can find me everywhere at Panita or at Critical Misses. And you can find me here again on Tuesdays. Darby and I are going to be finishing our 2-player game of I Have the High Ground, which is about the tense banter before a duel kicks off. And then Wednesdays, you can find me by myself here for Solo Act, where I play solo TTRPGs. I had a really good time with a couple of Super Dylan's games last week. And we are looking forward to trying out some more. Maybe I'll do some map building ones. That's it. That's me.
Hey, Quincy, go ahead and tell us about yourself.
I am Quincy again, Quincy Surasmith. You can find me on the internets at Quintessence at most places. I think it's in the title card for this episode. If you need a reference or maybe a helpful mod is writing into chat.
It is in chat.
Please listen to my show, Asian Americana. You can find it at asianamericana.com or your favorite podcast app. And I play with Streampunk sometimes, not an active game right now, but check them out. Or you know, watch our Temple Frogs episode of Amphibia on Disney Plus, or our Floating Dreams episode of Mickey Mouse on Disney Plus, and maybe I'll get a residual in 2 years.
Hey, but when they come in, that's got to be nice, right?
Or actually, here's one to not help me out directly, but I want them to be popular. I was also the voice of DJ in the book series Hilo for their audiobook series, and there's like 8 of them out right now, and it's really great. It's like a graphic novel for kids, so go listen to that and listen for my voice for most of it. And then they switched to the black girl character Gina for the next set of books, so she becomes like the main narrator for those, and that's really cool too. So go listen to those.
Heck yeah. All right. Well, that has been our episode for today. We're going to go ahead and, you know what? I think this is a very streampunk themed episode. So why don't we rate our friend, the wonderful Sam DeLev over at DeLevely. They're playing Horizon Forbidden. I don't know the game's name, but it's fun. You should check it out. With that.
All right, everybody. Thank y'all so much for stopping by. And Quincy, thank you for chatting with us today.
Thank you so much, buddy.
Until next time, everyone, the ritual has concluded. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
We are clear.
I hate you so much.